Here we go. Cool. So, folks, we are just opening up the floodgates here and letting folks in. Probably just be a minute or two. But in the meantime, if you have anything you want to chat about or ping us a note or whatever the case, don't hesitate. Um, we have a pretty full session ahead here. I think we're going to more or less almost fill up the hour, but I want to make sure we leave some time at the end for some Q&A because I think that would be a lot of fun. There's not enough time typically for that sort of thing. So hoping we'll get some good folks here. There's Marina from a session I held earlier today, which is awesome. Good to see you again. Cool. Good stuff. It's so interesting. Abdul Karim, fantastic name. Of course, I grew up in the US where it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? He was like one of my main basketball players. I love that guy. And so immediately when I saw your name, I was like, no. Oh, it's backwards. Okay. Oh well. I don't know if you ever get referenced as that. Good stuff. So Zoe, are you going to be in charge of letting folks in?
Hi, Jeff. So I can't let folks in because you are the host. So
I got it. That's fine.
yeah, you need to take that one for now. No
Okay,
problem.
that's fine. No worries. I just wanted to make sure that I knew to do it is all. Here we go. Good. Brilliant. Just another 60 seconds, guys, and we'll go ahead and get cranking, okay? While you're waiting, do let me know where it is you're calling in from. I'd be fascinated to get a sense where people are coming from. France, nice. Got that. Chicago. Now we're talking. Good. London, Marina, good. Very good. Cool. Brussels, all sorts. Fantastic. Fantastic. Good. Right. Let's not waste any more precious time and let's get to this as quickly as possible. This is number three in an installment of sessions I'm kind of having on what's going to happen or what is happening relative to AI in the realm of human resources. It's a very, very exciting time, for us. Having said that, I've got a lot of research articles kind of published over the course of the summer, stuff coming from Deloitte, stuff coming from MIT, if you guys could do me a favor, just kind of mute yourselves, that'd be fantastic. Just so we don't have any background noise. But yeah, there was stuff coming from Deloitte, from MIT, from McKinsey, all the big players, Boston Consulting Group, and so forth. All of whom were doing lots of interesting and fairly deep research on AI projects that were in motion and how people were responding to those. And the news wasn't brilliant, to be perfectly honest. In fact, I think the MIT research kind of pointed out that something in the neighborhood of 85% of all the AI projects seem to have stalled or failed, interestingly. And then they kind of narrowed it down to the fact that, interestingly, it wasn't necessarily about the technology. What it was really all about was the preparatory activity of the people whose jobs and whose lives were going to be affected by the technology coming in. And there wasn't sort of a marriage and a connection made to the fact that, yeah, the technology is powerful and it can do lots of interesting things, but to focus on that and that alone, frankly, is probably the wrong angle on it. What we need to do first is we need to kind of reinvent from first principles how we would want our companies, our functions, our workflows to run, right, optimally, knowing everything we know now about how this stuff can work. And how do we basically start to then map that out so that AI can come in and properly pick that up and run with it, amplify it, and make it happen? What was happening is people were trying to amplify legacy processes. And of course, everything was starting to kind of fall down, which is unfortunate. Having said that, lesson learned, and there wasn't a single member who had claimed failure that wasn't going to push and try again with the new learnings in place. Okay, so that's kind of the direction we're going. So this session is very much going to be one around bridging the imagination gap and presuming that we have had good luck in pushing forward both AI automation as well as AI augmentation. And those two things are going to be important to discern and discriminate. So what I want to do today is to kind of start talking about the fact that AI is going to come in and what is it going to look like for us sort of in the next 2 to 3 years if we are actually successful in driving forward this change. So let's go through some of that. First of all, why is human resources so uniquely positioned to benefit from AI, right? Both through automation and augmentation. The fact of the matter is that AI can handle a lot of high volume, rules-based HR processes, things like payroll and benefits and initial candidate screenings, as an example, and huge chunks, obviously, of the recruitment process that basically then free up HR teams from that sort of administrative burden and basically allow us to start thinking more strategically. And the other cool thing is that AI can help us really analyze workforce data in ways that we've never been able to do so before and provide insights into trends and talent gaps and employee sentiment and augmenting, human judgment basically for a much more informed and strategic HR decision-making tree, which is super helpful. The technology can really create a much more responsive and a much more kind of tailored employee experience, especially in terms of things like personalized learning to AI-powered support, and really help boost that sense of satisfaction and engagement, that sense that this organization understands me and they cared enough to invest in tools basically that would help me, kind of be better at what it is I do. Okay, so that's super important. And the other thing is AI can optimize like every stage of the talent life cycle, really from sourcing amazing and diverse candidates to predicting retention risks and identifying skill development needs, so on and so forth. So it's really cool from that perspective. The AI augmented, I'm going to focus on augmentation. We're going to mention automation, but we're going to do so in a way that says we're going to assume that automation basically has taken care of the bottom few rungs of the value ladder. But nonetheless, super important stuff that's still needed to get done because it's really in the augmentation that we understand what the potential impact on HR roles is going to be moving forward. Okay. So the AI augmentation HR operating model, if you will, is sort of a new way of structuring the HR function that leverages AI, right, and the emerging technologies around it. And at the center of this augmented HR function represents sort of the core of the model, right, where the AI is deeply integrated into HR processes and decision making. And the inner ring kind of shows the new specialized roles that will become standard in HR, things like AI workforce strategist or HR data and AI ethics officer or employee AI experience designer. This is going to be fascinating because it's going to kind of take us into kind of a new plane of reality that says we not only need to make room potentially for machines, if you will, to come in and lift and shift the bulk of the ugly administration, bureaucratic, kind of policy enforcement types of activities that we used to do before, the sort of HR help desky types of things. and make room basically, for the machine to kind of manage it. But it's in the preparation for that where we have to do lots of like deep thinking in terms of this gray matter between our ears. And that is the super powerful function that the human is going to serve in this process. And it is not just the setup, it is the ongoing functioning of this process hereafter. And it's basically kind of, how can I use this as an analogy? Instead of being the people who have to ride the bike to make multiple deliveries over the course of a day, of a chosen day, we are actually kind of now being pulled into sort of a higher level plane of viewing, where suddenly we are in charge of 50 different people on 50 different bicycles going and doing delivery throughout the course of the day. And it's now our challenge to start to think holistically and systemically about how is it we can best design the system or tell AI to help design the system to really optimize our ability to deliver things on time in a way that benefits the riders the drivers of the bikes, as well as those receiving the deliveries, and make sure everybody gets home safe and on time, right? In a way that's kind of like, the sort of role we end up taking, which again is a more strategic, higher functioning role, which is interesting. So we're going to focus on that, and let that kind of hopefully create a bit of a blueprint for how HR functions evolve and thrive in the age of AI. Let's personalize this a little bit because I think it's going to be important when you consider the different roles that currently exist in AI. I had my friends at ChatGPT 5 invent Anya. Anya Sharma is a seasoned senior HR leader who has been very forward thinking, pivotal in her organization's success so far. But she also realized that the real value unlock for her organization, HR, in terms of its ability to help steer the commercial success of the company, is not in being an HR help desk. It is not in processing thousands and thousands of activities over and over again, just to make sure that the basics get done. Instead, she dreamt of a day where a tool could in fact come and she and her team could really think through how is it we can completely reverse the legacy way of doing things and reinvent all the workflows such that we can then hand those things over to the machinery, AI, and let AI basically run with that. Once we are convinced and once we are satisfied that those workflows are working beautifully and smoothly, and importantly, everybody's happy about it. So this is a real challenge for leaders at the moment because they're not quite sure what to do. They may not be technically oriented. They might be more importantly focused on risk mitigation and keeping the organization clean relative to things like court cases and tribunals and those types of challenges. They might be more concerned about administration, governance, compliance as being sort of core to what they do. And they view the technology as being a risk factor, right? What if we accidentally spill a whole bunch of sensitive stuff out to the world accidentally? Who's responsible for that? And what kind of punishment am I going to have to levy in order to ensure that that never happens again? And look, the kinds of provisions in GDPR and the EU AI Act are devastating. I mean, they're talking about things like if you have an intentional breach of information, of private information, that suddenly gets pulled into ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever it is, Claude, whatever you're using, and that information suddenly is exposed to the world, you could potentially be fined for up to something like 17% of your global revenue as an organization, which seems excessive and punitive. And a presumption, I think, is there in the lawmakers' minds anyway, that companies would just run amok if they weren't heavily regulated and scared to death that they would do something wrong and that those penalties would be there for them. The problem is it puts us in a tough spot because AI is not going away. In fact, there are companies that are tripling and quadrupling down on AI. right? Not just to save money, but to really drive productivity for each individual up. Um, and it is absolutely 10xing plus their productivity and their output and their revenues. That's finally starting to kind of come true. But again, the hard work in advance of that is really the work that needs getting done. So Anya is in between a rock and a hard place. She wants to innovate. She wants to maintain her department's reputation and as being a strong provider, but she knows she has to change gears and change things very, very quickly. So look, over the next 2 to 3 years, her function, Anya's function, is very much going to evolve through very distinct phases and transform basically how the value, if you will, of the department is going to be delivered to the organization. And phase one is almost always this notion of AI coming in to streamline transactional HR tasks like administration, compliance, basic reporting, employee lifecycle preparation. So, for instance, thinking about performance management and how that whole thing can kind of get set up. Um, that doesn't necessarily have to be done by a human. If in fact there are rules and there is a process and everybody is happy with that, the machine can come in and kind of manage that and push it forward. Okay. And this phase one basically will take on board all of these new workflows and will need supervision and we'll need to kind of like make sure that these things are done well and that people are satisfied with it. But that then frees up, hopefully, the HR teams from having to do this repetitive, heavy lifting work so they can focus on things that are really value add and really strategic in terms of human talent initiatives. Phase two, say this is probably going to take you about a year to get all the automation stuff done, maybe less, but probably about a year. In phase two, you can start working in parallel to start enhancing the strategic HR activities, by providing, for instance, like deeper data insights and predictive analytics for areas like recruitment selection, right? Performance assessment and personalized learning paths, as an example. But you can also start to build these incredible three-dimensional models around people because you can now use AI to manage a lot of disparate data sources to start to build a three-dimensional picture around people, almost like a hologram, if you will, that says, this is Bradley. And Bradley has been with us for 3 years. And Bradley has, in total, 10 years of experience and is a real superstar, a very high performer. This is typically where he's working. This is what he's getting paid. That is in X quartile, maybe say with the upper 75% quartile from a pay perspective. But we're starting to get some interesting negative vibes coming from Brad in terms of, for instance, his I don't know, maybe he registered some concerns about the way his department is working and delivering things, and he's frustrated. Interestingly, taking a look at his attendance, it seems like he's taken more time off than he's ever taken before previously. Um, and his line manager has kind of registered some concern in his performance review that's kind of indicating that Brad is starting to kind of disengage. He's starting to disconnect from the organization. He's not feeling it anymore. To catch that early is really critical because typically, by the time we learn things like this, where our high performers are suddenly unhappy, well, seemingly suddenly, um, they are already picking up the phone to recruiters. They're already looking for that next incredible experience because this one is just not panning out and they don't see a way out. So the question then begs, how do we basically build an engine around that to make sure that we do catch and capture those types of elements and are able to start to turn those things around? In phase three, say that's maybe 3 years down the road, we'll have sort of a much more brilliantly augmented, complex HR function that's really kind of elevating the quality of the outcomes of talent management, right? In terms of doing things like, helping us through the building and creation of skills-based organizations, create things like internal mobility, where employees can shop around for new opportunities. They can see the adjacencies from a skills development perspective between what they're doing now and maybe what they're going to do within the job family or possibly laterally outside of the job family. And that can basically be captured in terms of an instantaneously developed development plan that they can work with their line managers to ensure they have time to commit to it and that they get the training they want to. And importantly, they get the commitment from their manager that if they do complete this critical development and they are prepared then to kind of make a move, that, I don't know, 3, 6 months from now, that the line manager can really help them, kind of make that happen. That's brilliant on an individual basis, but also to kind of have that level of information and insight in terms of, project staffing, in terms of new product development, in terms of restructuring in the organization, to have the insight as to who has what skill, to what level of capacity, and who can deliver what would just be an incredible scientific improvement in terms of how it is we help manage our people. And importantly, our people would feel like, wow, I will always ever have really powerful and exciting things to do here, as long as obviously I kind of hold up my end of the bargain as well. So that's the idea, is we want to go from automation to this augmentation to this synergistic connection is sort of the ultimate kind of driver. Now, in terms of thinking this through, the transition to AI augmented HR models is this notion of creating new roles that demand a blend of human expertise and technological fluency, I guess is what you would call it. And these roles will be underpinned by specific skill sets and measured by new metrics of success because we haven't done these things before, and they're going to be slightly atraditional to what it is we've done before in HR. And we're going to need to take on and ensure we've got the essential skill sets for the AI revolution, the AI era, because it's going to be essential that we start to think more critically, that we have this really powerful kind of empathic engagement with humans in our organization, because that's a huge differentiator between what it is we can offer directly versus AI, albeit AI does have this wonderful, sycophantic, kind of connection sometimes to people, and people sometimes feel infinitely more comfortable engaging with AI, interestingly, than they do with actual human beings. It's fascinating. We need to be really dead good at change management and anticipating what this impact is going to be, not just on us, not just on HR, but across the entire company, because everybody's going to be going through this change. And we have to be masters of that. And this is our opportunity, frankly, to take that on. We also have to ramp up our AI literacy. And this isn't hard, people. I am not a technologist. I love technology. I love what it does. I'm blown away by the incredible impact it's having. And I'm fascinated from that perspective. And all I've been doing for the past 2 years is just deep diving into how these things are structured, what these things do, what the different acronyms are in terms of how these things work. And I'll tell you what, it's not that hard to figure out. Yeah, I am not a data scientist, and I will never, ever be an AI programmer. I wish I was, because I'd be making a fortune right now. But that's okay, because at least I will have learned what the capacity and capability of these tools are and these capabilities are, such that I can then go back to my HR world and say, God, there's so much that can fix. I can see it now. And that's basically what our jobs are at this stage, is to figure out if we've got these new kinds of tools that can really lift and shift and turn these painful workflows into something that's a much more efficient and much more powerful experience for people, then that's what we got to embrace. We also want to make sure that we're kind of like measured by key performance indicators, right, that are going to reflect the efficiency gains and the enhanced employee experience that we're trying to create, and the ethical AI integration. And in the following sections, we're going to explore what some of these roles might look like, okay, and outlining the core competencies and the key metrics for success. So let's go to our first one. Now, these slides are intentionally busy. There's a lot going on in here, and I apologize for that. But because I want to be able to offer you guys the recording for this, and importantly, a link to the deck, which I will send out to you all afterwards in the chat. I want you to be able to kind of take a look at the notes, and I want you to kind of see all the information that kind of sits behind it, because I think it's actually a pretty reasonably, kind of realistic and well-shaped notion in terms of what these new roles are going to be. And here's a great one, for instance, AI workforce strategist. So everybody's heard about strategic workforce planning and how painful that is. And let's face it, it's like this weird discipline all to its own. Everybody claims to have some kind of magic associated with this. The challenge of it is how do you basically understand what the organization needs to accomplish in terms of its commercial ambitions year over year? And then how do you then convert that back into a workforce plan that says we will need then therefore X number of skills. We will also need X number of individuals to deliver those skills in these locations. And we will need this to happen and this to happen and everything else. And that basically should then feed the HR team all that it needs to know to then kind of get agreement around this strategic workforce plan, sort out the money, understand how much it's going to cost us, get agreement around that, and then build that into a tactical plan for the talent acquisition folks to take on, for the hiring managers to prepare for. And then basically we got to figure out how is it we can trim down and compress the amount of time spent to find the best possible candidates in the shortest period of time and get them here and going. Okay. That sounds like a mountain of work, and it is if you have to do it manually. But if you've developed the skills-based organizational model and you've used tools like AI to help you kind of understand that stuff, it becomes a hell of a lot easier to inform all of those roles, the TA role, the hiring manager role, the finance role, the CEO role, even in terms of getting that stuff fully automated. And actually, then we can track its success hereafter. So an AI workforce strategist might start each day by like looking at some kind of a morning insight pack that provides like predictive attrition forecast with 85% accuracy. That would be amazing. Real-time skill surplus and gap analysis, diversity metrics and intervention recommendations, talent redeployment, opportunities across the department. How do we basically make sure we understand the fluidity of people's capabilities so that we don't have to lose them? Because we don't want to keep losing institutional knowledge in terms of how things always ever got done here. Where are the skeletons buried? How do we make that work faster, better, smarter, cheaper, right? We don't want to lose that, capability. We also don't want morale to suffer dramatically as a result as well in terms of people leaving. We want to be able to use these insights, and the strategist, can make proactive decisions on talent redeployment and often kind of address like potential gaps before they materialize into something really painful. They can leverage AI simulation platforms, and this is going to be big over and over again. We need to be in the business of scenario planning and simulation illustration. That's going to be basically our magic. Because if we can rock up to an executive meeting and say, hey, give us the various parameters. What is it you're working with? How quickly do you want to get there? What kind of money do you got to invest? And we will basically start building out scenarios for you so you can just basically, change the parameters. Our model then will kind of model what it is you're able to deliver. That is the magic that we are so far away from right now that we're desperate to need. Okay. And the leveraging of like an AI simulation platform to model the impact of these different strategies and optimize this stuff for organizational agility is really the power magic. Okay. An employee AI experience designer. So what is this all about? Is this just sort of a nice to have? Like we just want people to have a good time here. We just want them to kind of feel like they belong and that they're special. No, this is about productivity. This is about getting people used to the fact that now that we're going to embrace AI as sort of critical in the shaping of how it interfaces basically with the human workforce, we want to make sure that the technological advances and enhancements are going to work together, that are going to produce that productivity or that efficiency and that sense of connection to something more, I don't know, more capable and powerful than ourselves is going to work in a way that feels symbiotic and not necessarily, kind of, I guess, opposed to one another. This is important. This interestingly came up in an article I read, and I forgot the name of the company, but there was a CEO that that was so hell-bent on basically making sure that people adopted AI tools and AI throughout the organization that he got super frustrated when people started to not just not engage with the AI tools, but actually start to sabotage the process of adopting AI tools. And ultimately, he ended up, I kid you not, replacing up to 85% of his company, and weirdly said he would do it again, as disruptive and painful as I'm sure that was. I don't want to talk about stories like that. I think that's reasonably horrific, and that's kind of not the space we want to be in. But we do need, therefore, to start thinking in advance of engaging with tools like AI to realize that there needs to be this connection between the individual, the human beings around this, and the technologies that are not going to be, in a way, punitive to the human being, but in fact going to ultimately elevate them. Okay. So this goes beyond just, kind of usability. This is about crafting empathic and efficient and genuinely helpful AI interactions throughout the course of the entire employee lifetime. Key responsibilities might include, as an example, personalized AI onboarding, right? Agents, AI-powered tools for learning, career pathing, performance feedback, mental well-being support, as an example. The designer basically also kind of monitors the engagement metrics, the satisfaction scores, the productivity gains to continuously kind of refine and improve the human AI interaction to make sure that that's actually working. And collaboration is really central here, working closely across the organization between HR and IT and learning and development and employees to make sure that this sort of user-centric, ethical, and impactful AI experience comes to life. Challenges, of course, like I mentioned before, are going to be things like ensuring data privacy and managing employee expectations and overcoming resistance to AI adoption. All of those things will be there guaranteed. So the question is, how do you work around that? How do you work with people so that they don't end up working against you? And success is ultimately going to be measured by, employees' AI interaction satisfaction, adoption rates, time to proficiency, reduction in administrative burdens, and improvements in internal mobility and career growth. So it's a really powerful and very important decision, or a position, I should say. This also is obviously critical and probably one of the first hires once you actually start to adopt or consider adopting AI is to have sort of an HR data and AI ethics officer, lack of a better term. I hate that expression because it sounds so punitive and potentially enforcement oriented. But there will be elements of this and it's got to be looked at. Okay. It's a critical role because basically it has to ensure that the AI powered HR systems are fair, that they're ethical, that they are preventing the perpetuation of historical bias, right? And that they are not creating new ones, importantly. That actually can happen very, very simply if, in fact, you just kind of lob a tool into this place. And AI models are very objective driven. Okay. When you give them an objective, they will figure out any old way to get to that objective and not necessarily consider things like ethical fairness or anything like that or bias. They'll basically just figure out the shortest path between this and this to ultimately get to the goal that you basically set up for it. So it's important that we think through those processes in the way that we construct AI in our companies. This role definitely involves like continuous bias auditing. It's important that we have audit trails and that those trails are transparent and visible and explainable. That's super important. And those cool tools and capabilities are now kind of coming online to create that explainability, which is going to be important because at some point we will have government agents knocking on our doors saying, "Oh, hold on a minute. We've had a couple of complaints. Can we have a look at your data?" And you want to be able to say, "Yep, come on in. Let's walk you through how it is we structured this, how we document this stuff, how we audit this ourselves, and this is how we ended up." If you don't have a good answer to that, well, then you end up like Workday at the moment, who is being sued across multiple different geographies at this stage for potentially discriminating against new hires or candidates based on age and disabilities, interestingly. And that is now also pulled into, a judge has ruled as much, has pulled into that fray those vendors, sorry, those buyers of those vendors of that vendor Workday, and so they are now going to potentially be held to account for any kind of unexplainable bias that may have occurred in the use of that tool. So we just want to make sure that we're on top of that. We want the detailed, kind of documentation and governance and make sure that all that stuff is, again, transparent, accountability is very much in place, and that there's regulatory compliance that you're comfortable with. This role, the officer, kind of designs and implements, kind of comprehensive ethical AI principles and guidelines tailored for all the all the HR rather applications, including responsible AI development and deployment. And frankly, that's again another area from a cross-functional collaboration perspective where we can share information in terms of how we're structuring our AI build-outs with other functions in the organization so that we've got consistency across the piece. It's really critical that we are able to kind of oversee this stuff. And beyond auditing, the officer, kind of deeply embeds ethical AI practices within HR operations and uses advanced bias detection methods. And there's lots of interesting software companies that are now kind of popping up that basically claim to be able to handle this, which is kind of cool. Key performance indicators for this would be, for instance, include compliance audit pass rates, bias incident resolution rates, algorithmic transparency indexes, all of these things that frankly we've never done before. So this is going to be new, and we're going to need to develop some intelligence around this, and then start to share our experience, which is going to be quite wild. Okay. Here's another role. AI talent intelligence analyst. And this is really quite fascinating. An AI talent intelligence analyst leverages large language models and advanced analytics to transform HR data basically into strategic insight. So in a way, it's a little bit like people analytics, but you can do it with a much faster modality. You don't need the heavy weight, for instance, of an HR bench or Visier or some of these other vendors that kind of require you to kind of set up all your data in a particular format. You can basically work with either structured or unstructured data to kind of drive this stuff forward. The insights ultimately would help kind of like drive decisions around workforce development, internal mobility, targeted external hiring, and organizational agility, talent liquidity, if you will. Key responsibilities might include, predictive workforce modeling, dynamic talent mapping, large language model powered insights generation, skills taxonomy management, strategic scenario planning, all those things we kind of talked about. This role would be kind of critical and central to that, and would basically likely, have multiple internal clients within the HR team, but also work with some of the analytics folks on the outside. And overcoming data quality challenges is always ever going to be a challenge. Mitigating algorithmic bias in terms of like, are you getting weird messages indicating for some reason that a system or a process is favoring one demographic over another? And how is that working, and why is that happening, and how is it we can ultimately change that? Promote data literacy within the organization, right, is critical in terms of the success for this role, because you don't want somebody just speaking, kind of LLM language, AI language, and having people going, I don't really understand what Sam is on about. Sounds really clever, sounds really important, but I don't see it, how it's impacting my organization. The key performance indicators, for instance, would be things like reduction in time to fill critical roles, increase in internal placement rates, cost savings from reskilling, accuracy of skill obsolescence forecasts, and employee engagement in learning programs. Fascinating, right? This is not, our mom and dad's HR department anymore, right? It's not even our HR department anymore. This is basically taking things to the next level because AI basically helped us do this. Another one, really critical, AI adoption and upskilling partner. Absolutely critical right now, possibly one of the most immediate hires that you probably want to make. in terms of helping them foster a culture of innovation and of continuous learning. And this is going to be a big factor. I can't remember who it was, if it was Jensen Wang or who was talking about one of the critical skills that we're going to have to potentially relearn or learn from scratch is this love and curiosity for learning. And basically, getting into a place where every day we are taking in, I don't know, an hour's worth of new information and processing that. Because we're going to ultimately need to, given the speed with which AI will start to drive change in our organizations. So it's going to be really critical that we foster this culture of continuous learning and bridge the gap between theoretical understanding and the practical application of these AI technologies. Okay. A role like this would transform AI apprehension into confidence, right? Through targeted kind of dynamic learning experiences and using, personalized learning paths. There may be people who already know a bunch of the stuff, and they basically just need to kind of like, I don't know, upskill by a factor of 20 additional percent. There'd be a lot of people, frankly, who have zero experience with AI, really are worried about it, don't understand it, and they really need to be brought through very quickly, mind you, brought through a process of kind of getting upskilled into that. But that's then a challenge for this role, right? This adoption and upskilling partner, because they need to kind of introduce new types of learning, highly personalized, gamified challenges, micro learning, learning in the flow of work, and continuous coaching, right? Finding people in the organization who love to share their experience with other people, and to really kind of get their eyes open to the possibilities. The goal basically is to ensure the entire organization builds the AI literacy and the practical skills needed for the future workplace, which is basically around the corner. This is not like future, don't worry about it, it's 5 years away. This is like it's starting to happen right now. Okay. So the goal is basically, or the key responsibilities for this role would include things like, again, creating personalized learning path design, curriculum development, gamified learning experience management, competency measurement, and AI community building internally, so that people can exchange experience and ideas. They would basically operate in sort of an iterative workflow, kind of constantly refining programs based on the feedback and the evolving AI trends, which of course are evolving daily, which is crazy. And collaborate closely, with various teams across your organization. There would probably be one of these in almost every function in the business. They would also be working on doing things like overcoming challenges like skepticism and ensuring the content relevance and driving sustainable behavioral change, measuring the ROI on this stuff. It's critical that they do that stuff. Otherwise, people think this is just a waste of time. It's just sort of a nice training effort. And the key performance indicators would be things like increasing AI-driven innovation, reduction in support tickets, high completion rates for learning paths, and cross-departmental knowledge sharing would be really key. Really interesting role, actually. Here's a powerful role, and one that's not for the lighthearted. This is not one of those roles that people would take on casually and just learn through watching YouTube videos. The agentic AI workflow orchestrator. So if you can imagine an environment where you don't just have one or two AI agents that are processing, things for you independently and possibly even autonomously. Yes, with a potential human in the loop from time to time. But for the most part, they're just managing an entire workflow automatically. What if you then had 20 agents, right, working seamlessly across the organization, all interconnected, all basically communicating with one another, right? Making decisions like workforce planning, getting approvals automatically from finance, from the exec team, from the department, and basically that then going to the TA team. The TA team approves it. It then goes out to market, automated, and carries on a whole kind of recruitment process until such time you get to a short list, at which point then humans get involved. Oh, my goodness. There's a lot of people involved in that whole process. And what if one or two or three of these agents starts to wobble, starts to do things that it wasn't originally programmed to do because it just thought, well, I have a goal and I'm going to get to that goal no matter what. And if I have to do a workaround because people aren't responding the way they should do, I'm going to do that. I'm going to automatically escalate, or I'm going to basically just take that particular issue out of play, and I'm just going to go and execute on it. Your AI workflow orchestrator needs to kind of be on top of that and to make sure that the thing is working smoothly, where there is breakage, where things are falling down, where things are not working optimally like they should have done, like they were designed to do. They need to be able to step in and basically say, let's fine tune this, let's fix this, let's make sure the prompts are working as they should have done. Let's improve the agent performance and establish escalation rules to get humans in the loop. Let's continuously monitor and optimize the system performance, that kind of a thing. In a way, it's like overseeing an entire assembly line. So that's going to be another, critical process that we're going to have to get probably somebody reasonably technical in to kind of manage all that. This is interesting and similar to an earlier role, a human AI collaboration coach, right? And this sort of is a different kind of role in that it's ensuring that AI remains a partner and not a threat to human leaders. Okay. They basically help leaders navigate the delicate balance of leveraging AI's analytical power while maintaining the human connection and essential to kind of effective leadership, right? So the coach has sort of expanded, pardon me, responsibilities, including coaching leaders on interpreting AI insights, building trust and adoption of AI, designing seamless human AI workflows, and kind of creating a process for that everybody kind of understands, and it doesn't feel foreign. It doesn't feel like it's some kind of magic box activity. Measuring collaborative effectiveness across the organization with tools like AI, and making sure that ethical AI integration is constantly top of mind. Um, so they would use different kind of coaching methodologies and tools. They would make sure that in terms of kind of like, well, facilitated workshops is another thing. They'd probably drive individualized coaching, custom dashboards, best practice playbooks as they develop. So they'd probably be well connected, not just even internally in an organization, but also kind of to external communities and learning from others. The idea here is to help people balance what work is critically human, like human judgment, like critical thinking, like empathic engagement, and all of those kind of components versus what activities, frankly, absolutely could be handed over to a machine. And then basically helping people kind of manage that whole process. So there's no doubt about it, folks. HR is undergoing a massive transformation due to the rise of AI, right? And it's basically in the first 3 months, we talked about the fact that likely your focus is going to be on building foundational AI literacy, prompt engineering, understand the risks associated with data privacy and how the data can flow, and importantly, how we can protect our data and manage our data. And it is totally manageable, by the way, either through anonymization of the information, but also there are now enterprise level large language model tools out there that are making sure that your data is perfectly safe and on this side of the firewall and never basically going to be used for training data going forward. But that's really what we got to focus on immediately. We got to get people smart. We got to get people trained. We got to get people comfortable with these concepts and ideas and these new roles. And we have to act as if they're real and start to develop, some sourcing in terms of where we're going to find these people. Once we get them on board, how is it we're going to train them and build them up? From the first 3 months, and then over the next 9 months, we need to develop more advanced capabilities like agentic AI management, strategic workforce design, governance frameworks, and ethics oversight. It's going to be really essential that we do that. And again, appreciate that all feels like highly specialized stuff, only because there's just not loads and loads and loads of people out there to do it. But this stuff is eminently trainable as well, right? So compliance officers can absolutely pick up a load of this stuff because a lot of this is very adjacent to things that they already manage. Same with legal, same with IT, same with HR. Okay. And in 13 to 24 months, so we're talking like 2 years out, our teams basically should have very powerful data analytics proficiency. They should have a real sense for what AI can come in and impact based on what information, what data we have. And we should also be working very diligently on the quality and the existence of our data and our data sources, and also understand if, what tools do we need to connect through APIs and things of that nature so that they can basically talk to each other and AI can then step in, extract data, and make sense of it in ways that we've never done that before. We should also get brilliant at change leadership, and we should make sure that we are a champion for intelligent change leadership throughout the entire organization, and that we basically become, if you will, hopefully, the folks that can help drive a lot of this transformation going forward. We also have to be good at human-centered design because this is critical. Getting people involved who are going to be most affected by the implementation of AI systems and tools is essential to get them to not fear it, to not run away and hide, or worse, come back and sabotage, the ability for us to kind of engage with these new tools. The key message really is that AI in HR is inevitable, and that organizations that invest in these capabilities now are going to have a significant competitive advantage. So it's critical that we kind of jump on that. With that, I am going to stop talking. You'll all be happy to know. And I want to make sure that we open this up to any questions that people might have. I don't see anything in the chat. So if I could ask you all to unmute if you want to and ask any questions of me, that would be amazing.
There is one question, Jeff, from Marina in the chat. Hopefully.
Cool. Here we go. So, with such novel roles and skills therein, where would we go to upskill, reskill, or look for such talent? I suspect a big chunk of these skills will come from non-HR backgrounds, experience, and expertise. Excellent question, Marina. You're absolutely spot on. Look, I think it's interesting. Very interesting in that you're absolutely right, Marina. These are like hybrid, kind of patterns that are sort of developing here. And they are coming from different disciplines. You can almost see it now. There's an element of HR, but there's clearly an element of IT. But it's not even IT, it's actually sort of programming and really understanding, if you will, the power of manipulating and using and exploiting AI to kind of get things done. It's really kind of probably more the realm of people analytics is probably where you're going to find people who just get this stuff very, very quickly. The use of AI is not hard, right? There is skill involved, but you can learn that skill in an afternoon. Prompt engineering, dead easy. What is hard is basically how is it I think about my organization, and how is it basically I can then take my thoughts around this and turn those into some level of reality. So, for instance, I'm trying to understand and build these 3D hologram-like pictures of staff members in my organization. What data do I need to make sense of that? Okay, it might be a prior CV. It might be, so the AI can kind of infer different skills and experiences. It might be pay data. It might be demographic data around things like gender. It might be, technical training recently. It might be a whole host of things that I wouldn't necessarily naturally put together. But if I want this 3D holograph of an individual, I now have to kind of think in slightly different ways. And that might be basically an upskilled business partner who just happens to have sort of an interesting and kind of exciting bent on technology and really kind of wants to get involved in this stuff. Or it might be one of your business analysts who says, "Gosh, I've been managing all sorts of issues and problems and challenges in this organization in terms of internal workflows, but now I can use tools like AI to help me rethink those things and to help me kind of possibly redesign those things anew." So it's going to come from multiple different disciplines, but we're going to have to absolutely kind of create sort of mini Frankensteins here and kind of bolt on, right? Some body parts, some thinking that we haven't had before. But here's the good news. AI can help you get there quite quickly, can really help you think that stuff through, which is really quite fascinating. Okay. Cool. No other questions?
Hi, Jeff, I have a question. Keen is my name. I was just listening in there. How are you?
Hey, good, Keen. How are you, mate?
Long time listener, first time caller, Jeff. No, I do. I enjoy your content on LinkedIn, so thank you. You're definitely on the money. I have a kind of HR technology advisory business, so I'm kind of like a HCM advisor. So I'm working with loads of clients to help them figure out the right HR tech stack for their business. Okay.
Okay.
So we are in the process of kicking the tires on building a kind of a product to kind of go along with our service. Okay.
All right.
We would deal a lot with HiBob, Darrenbox, and they are really leaning into the agentic AI. But they kind of through their MCP protocols, we could potentially layer on a kind of a no. My company's called Nova HCM bot, as it were, for our clients.
Okay.
So we're going to run through this office where I work. It's in Ireland. They actually have an AI accelerator, and we're actually going to go to that accelerator over the next 10 weeks
Brilliant.
because I see a common pain point in every client we go into, which is HR teams are kind of under-resourced. They're still working on, I would say high volume, low value work, and they haven't got to grips with automation. So AI is still an alien concept to all of the kind of HR teams that we talk to. They're not technical. They're just still doing everything over email. They're still very much, they're still copying and pasting stuff into spreadsheet stuff. That's the level of stuff that I'm dealing with. Okay.
Yep.
So I don't want to go, I guess I don't want to go in too fast, but I want to get on the train as well. I want us to be to be ready to kind of move as because like you saw it yesterday, Workday acquired Sana. They're
Yep.
trying to buy their way into this space,
They
right?
are.
Whereas companies like Darnbox this week launched their own agentic AI. They're called Super Agent.
Okay.
So I guess my question is, look, we're going to everything you said there was really interesting about bringing. I think in your last slide you had about agentic AI piece.
Mm.
We just want to help our clients find the right HR solution, okay, and then we stay on to kind of help them implement that. But as part of
Right.
the implementation phase, we have a three-step process: start, grow, scale. In the scale version of our business, we see an opportunity to maybe layer on an agent, so they could basically use our like I would you say see the HiBob or the Darrenbox agent as like a front door, like, you could call data, but I would see ours as the operation layer underneath that, okay, where
Yep.
maybe you might use our agent to complete a task or speak to payroll as well as speak to the data within the application. So we're going to, I guess, try that. But have you seen any other companies kind of go like us who are like in that advisory space try and move into the product space or like I don't know what the end result is. I just know that we're going to go down this path. We're going to figure something out, and we're lucky that we have a couple of clients that we can beta test this with,
Good.
and who would be open to kind of I've already kind of floated the idea, and because we build such credibility with them in terms of how we advise them and work with them, they know that we're highly competent and that we really are subject matter experts. And now we're trying to come along and say, well, if you also allow us, we can do this thing here, which is to help you streamline a workflow or improve an onboarding process or help you, close a step quicker, right?
Yep.
But I'm conscious there's not too many people outside of the HR vendors who are doing this. So it's probably a little bit unusual that a professional service company like ourselves is kind of trying to layer on an agentic AI solution. But
I think, to be honest with you, Sean, I think this is a really good idea. And I think the way you approach it simply is, to your point, it's a product, it's a new product you're offering.
yeah,
There's no doubt about it. And the way that you're going to basically invent this product, the products will basically, the product groupings and the structure around those will emerge over the course of time. But what you want to first do is have conversations with these people experiencing whatever level of inefficiency, whatever level of broken that they're experiencing, and kind of like hold that again, that human-centered design session with them to say,
yes,
talk to us about
Yeah.
the process. We're going to outline it for you. We're going to facilitate a discussion around this. And we're going to then kind of understand from you what you love and what you hate about this and what's
Yeah.
broken about this. Then prioritize that. Then we're basically going to ask about what systems you currently have that input into these elements and what's broken about that. And
See,
then
we
basically what we
know,
can, yeah,
yeah, we know all that already, Jeff. You see,
you
that's the
do.
beauty.
Okay.
We do. So we go in, we do a really deep diagnostic. We look at what your pain points are. We look at your
Right.
resources or your budget are, and then we build you a roadmap. And then we say, right, based on the size of your business, your budget, your resources, we think you'd be a good candidate for HiBob. Or if you're a 1,000+ employee business, we think you could be a good candidate for Darrenbox. And then we think this is what you should do in terms of implementation, adoption, change management. So I think we because we get a chance to go under the hood and do the diagnostic and see all of the pain points, we can then, where my head is going is we can probably identify a solution ourselves that we can layer on. And I think that's kind of where the angle is. So like what you're talking about is really on the money and your insight is really spot on, you know?
Well, it's very kind of you to say, but yeah, it is. It does present a particularly challenging problem, which is these people aren't falling out of trees,
No, no, no,
right?
no, no.
They are
And
not. They're not
you're dealing
staying.
with you're dealing with kind of like teams that are not technical.
Yeah.
So I don't know, did you see the Hitachi? They've merged their HR and IT teams because HR is moving into more of a data-driven type of profession, and I'm kind of preaching that as well. And I'm an ex-HR guy for my sins. So my background is HR and I came from HR, but then I moved into product
Right.
and now I'm doing this advisory type work. So I think I can kind of see the train has kind of left the station and we just kind of like we're on that train, but we don't really know the destination just yet. You know, but I think we're probably moving in the right direction. That's probably the
But
best way.
that pathway that you went on is exactly the pathway I would say that everybody has to come on. There's a guy named Volker Jacobs. Look him up on LinkedIn. Really interesting character. He has exactly the same mentality you do about
Yeah.
taking a product development and ownership and delivery element to this process because it doesn't exist. Again, these people like you are rare as hen's teeth, right? This notion of the fact that you worked in HR, so you understand that pain, the fact that you also enjoy technology, the fact that you're now working for, a professional services firm offering complex solutions to difficult problems. That really is the combo. You know what I mean? To kind of get people plugged in. But you're right. At this point, a lot of these HR people have always ever done HR stuff for the most part, or grew up in some sort of administrative type function and got pegged then to kind of do HR later on. Never technical stuff. And I love the notion of a marriage between IT and HR because IT is going to have to morph too. It's not just keeping laptops running.
No,
It's a
no, no.
whole lot more than that. And HR, it's not just about, kind of making sure paychecks show up. It's a hell
Yeah,
of a lot more than that. And so
yeah,
it's the marriage of those two things. We're going to see, I think, a lot of that over time. Moderna Pharmaceutical just did this interesting change. And I think now, and that got a lot of play. I mean, a shocking amount of play
yeah.
online. So I think a lot of people are like, duh, of course. Why didn't we think of that? And I think a lot of that's going to start to flow going forward.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thanks very much, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk more about it, whenever you're ready. By the way, folks, in the chat, I have given you the link to the presentation I just had. This is a Gamma.app tool. Oh my God, it is like the coolest thing on the planet. And I get nothing for saying this, but I have had such fun building presentations using a bit of AI to kind of come up with the concepts and ideas. And then I say, well, give me a Gamma ready kind of, format for this. And then I basically upload it into Gamma's AI and it just takes it and runs with it. And oh my God, it's beautiful. And I could do this all day long. And it takes minutes, not hours. Um, Having said that, there's some really useful kind of stuff in there too. There are notes for each of the slides that you'll see, and you just click on the upper right-hand corner for that little icon, and you'll see a whole list of notes. That's where that stuff is.
Brilliant.
But yeah, do enjoy those. And if you have any questions, my information, I think, is at the back of the presentation. Don't hesitate to reach out. Look, this is a hard process. I see no competition at all in the space that I'm in. There's not near enough of us to kind of like go marching into this brave new world. We are making this stuff up as we go along. We're learning like mad people. And it is a blast, actually, in terms of fixing stuff that I've always ever hated about HR in the first instance. So this part is quite fun.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for taking time and hanging in there. Really appreciate it. It's been a load of fun chatting with you, and hopefully we'll connect again soon.
Thank you so much.
pleasure. So do you want to catch up on a separate channel, or let's see, hold on a second. We have anybody else still here? Got some folks hanging in. Yeah, let's catch up on a separate channel and we'll just do whatever admin we need to do and we'll take it from there.
Cool. I'll send you a Google Meet link. One sec.
Lovely. Thank you. Cheers.
Good luck.
Bye.